How's it going, American History 2 students? This is Mr. Bell coming back at you with another online video lesson. This is day 157 of 180 of the school year. It is COVID-19 shutdown day 29. This is your lesson for Wednesday, May 6, 2020. Let's start with the warm-up. Describe the Berlin Airlift. This is when the Allied powers, France, England, America, tried to bring in supplies to Eastern Germany, which had been taken over by the Russians, by the Soviet Union. They refused to give up the part that they had helped rebuild, unlike France and England and America post-World War II. So whenever there was a blockade created to keep supplies such as food, water, blankets, things of that nature, medicine from getting to the people who were trapped in East Germany because of the Soviets. Think about these people. They went from oppression from Hitler to oppression from Joseph Stalin. They are blocked by the Red Army, the Russian military. So what happens is the Allied forces airdrop those supplies. Stalin has a choice. Do I start World War III here and now, right after World War II is ended, or do I just let the supplies drop after all the people need them? And he chooses to just let the supplies drop. What is the 38th parallel? That is what divides North and South Korea, with the northern part being communist and the southern part being free. It is where the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, is located. Why did Truman fire MacArthur? Well, Truman had sent in Douglas MacArthur, the overall commander of the Allied forces in the Pacific during World War II, to command the American forces in Korea. And when the Chinese had sided with the North Koreans and were firing at the Americans and the South Koreans, he says, let's just go to war with China. After all, they're the bigger communist threat than North Korea. And he didn't want to listen to Truman, who was the commander-in-chief as being the president, and he wanted to attack the Chinese, so Truman fired him because he wanted to attack China during the Korean War. Describe the Berlin Airlift, an airdrop of supplies from the Allied forces to Eastern Germany post-World War II. The 38th parallel divides North and South Korea, communist from free. North being communist, Southern free. The last one here, he fired MacArthur because he wanted to invade China, attack China during the Korean War. Okay, that's your warm-up for today. So today's focusing on a reading activity regarding the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's review the Cuban Missile Crisis. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, 90 miles off the coast of Florida, on the island of Cuba, not too long after the Castro Communist Revolution had swept across that island nation, they became close allies with the Russians. After the Bay of Pigs, in which JFK decided to send CIA-trained ops to try to assassinate Castro. That falls flat on his face for JFK and is an embarrassment to him and his brother, who helped plan the operation, Attorney General Bobby Kennedy. And Cuba decides they want to protect themselves, so they bring in a huge shipment of nuclear weapons that they are in the process of making operational, that during a reconnaissance flyover, our Air Force discovers. JFK has to deal with this. He cannot allow a communist country so close to Florida to have nuclear capability that could strike D.C., New York, and places on the East Coast. So he writes several letters. He tries to do this while avoiding World War III. This takes place over the course of 13 days. At one point, a reconnaissance plane is shot down, and JFK comes very close to retaliating, which would have started World War III had he listened to his generals. He decides to back off after the Russians and the Cubans say it was an accident. He then creates a naval blockade in which the Russians, who are transporting a second big wave of nuclear weapons to the island of Cuba, have a choice. They can cross the blockade and they can start World War III, the ball's in their court, or they can turn around and we can avoid World War III. Fortunately for everyone involved, they turn around, nuclear war is avoided. The Cubans reach a deal with the Americans that we will take, or with the Russians rather, that we will take Jupiter missiles out of Turkey, which were pointed at Russia, if they will take their nuclear missiles out of Cuba. Ended up being a little bit of a bigger deal for us to get rid of those nuclear weapons, but World War III is averted. This is probably the biggest accomplishment of JFK's short presidency because of the assassination, of course. So that's the Cuban Missile Crisis kind of in review. So today we're going to do a reading activity. During this time, there were several letters written between Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, Fidel Castro, the leader of Cuba, and JFK. The man sent letters between one another. Since we are in this COVID learning environment, online learning environment, rather than have you read all three, I'm just going to have us read the JFK one. The one that is going to be as the biggest significance to us from the American perspective, and see what he put in his letter to Khrushchev, who was the Russian premier. So here's the letter that JFK wrote to Khrushchev, trying to avoid World War III. This will go along with the reading activity that I've also posted earlier this week and should aid you in that. So here we go. JFK points out that the U.S. is pursuing a minimum response but will do whatever necessary to assure security. So not looking for aggression but leaving that door open. This letter is from President Kennedy to Nikita Khrushchev, October 22nd, 1962. Dear Mr. Chairman, this is all classified at the time but has since been declassified. First paragraph. A copy of the statement I am making tonight concerning developments in Cuba and the reaction of my government thereto has been handed to your ambassador in Washington, the Russian ambassador. In view of the gravity of the developments to which I refer, I want you to know immediately and accurately the position of my government. So he's laying out our views on this situation, this crisis. Second paragraph. In our discussions and exchanges on Berlin, talking about the Berlin Wall going up, and other international questions, the one thing that has most concerned me has been the possibility that your government would not correctly understand the will and determination of the United States in any given situation. In other words, they were underestimating us. Since I have not assumed that you or any other sane man would, in this nuclear age, deliberately plunge the world into a war which it is crystal clear no country could win, and which could only result in catastrophic consequences to the whole world, including the aggressor. Later on, we'll talk about something called MAD. It was a term the Russians and Americans used to describe what a nuclear war would be like between the two. MAD stood for Mutual Assured Destruction. It's real simple. They nuke us. When that nuke's on its way over there, we nuke them. Boom, boom. Nuclear holocaust. At our meeting in Vienna and subsequently, this was referring to a summit in Vienna, Switzerland, in which Khrushchev and Kennedy met for the first time. Khrushchev saw Kennedy as an inexperienced kid that he could bully around. I express our readiness and desire to find through peaceful negotiation the solution to any and all problems that divide us at the same time. I made clear that in the view of the objectives of the ideology to which you adhere, the United States could not tolerate any action on your part which is in a major way disturbed the existing overall balance of power in the world. I stated that in an attempt to force abandonment of our responsibilities and commitments in Berlin would constitute such an action that the United States would resist with all the power at its command. It was in order to avoid, next paragraph, any incorrect assessment on the part of your government with respect to Cuba that I publicly stated that if certain developments in Cuba took place, the United States would do whatever had to be done to protect its own security and that of its allies. Moreover, next paragraph, the Congress adopted a resolution expressing its support of this declared policy. Despite this, the rapid development of long-range missile bases and other offensive weapons in Cuba has proceeded. I must tell you that the United States is determined that this threat to the security of this hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, be removed. At the same time, I wish to point out that the action we are taking is the minimum necessary to remove the threat to the security of the nations of this hemisphere. In other words, he's trying to avoid a nuclear war. The fact of this minimum response should not be taken as a basis, however, for any misjudgment on your part. In other words, hey, we're taking it easy now, but if you keep escalating this thing, we're not going to rule out a nuclear strike. Here's the ending. I hope that your government will refrain from any action which would widen or deepen this already grave crisis, and that we can agree to resume the passive peaceful negotiation. Sincerely, John F. Kennedy. Two very simple questions here. Let me fix that extra space. Why did JFK feel this way? What did he feel here? In your eyes, was the path JFK was heading the proper one for his country? Why or why not? This is an opinion-based question. I'm asking you to answer both of these. This should not be that hard at all. But if you need any help, make sure you email me, bsbell@clevelandcountyschools.org. I hope this watch-along helped. Thank you so much. Have a great day.